Hello, my name is Madison Rye, and I'm the Application Engineering Manager at Ally PLM Solutions. Thank you for joining me today online to talk about the capabilities of Solid Edge for SharePoint, previously known as Insight XT. We should be about an hour today, and since we have a lot of people in our GoToMeeting session, I've muted you all. If you have any questions or comments, just please email me at the address that you see on your screen. Our agenda for today, we're going to talk about PLM and PDM, software requirements, setting up Solid Edge for SharePoint, the transparent user interface, SharePoint interface, security, added user benefits, and I'm going to do an example of Solid Edge for SharePoint with workflow. I tell everybody when I go out to companies that, and this is what I see honestly, when I go places, if you have under 5 engineers, you may be able to control your data. You may be able to sit in the same room, you know what this person's working on, you know what that person's working on. Once you get over 5 engineers, you really need a data management system because you're going to run into trouble. And the longer you wait, the worse the trouble's going to be. So when we talk about PLM or PDM, let's clarify these terms. The life cycle of your product is the time from the early concept stage through the design, analysis, prototyping, manufacturing, right to the end when the product's obsolete. Siemens offers a wide range of products to support this life cycle. As you know, Solid Edge is for design and drafting, and we also have NX for design and drafting. For analysis, we have a new add-on called Simulation, as well as FEMAP and NX Simulation, and they all use the Nastran solver, which is the industry standard in solvers. For taking that 3D data and producing a physical part, we offer NXCAM and NXCAM Express. All of the data that you generate during this life cycle needs to be managed, and typically Teamcenter is a solution for that if you're talking multi-CAD and multi-site. So you can see here that really that's the biggest difference. You have the ability, almost any CAD system you want, you can integrate with Teamcenter, and then literally whatever you want to do. They have a package for everything here. So, and then multi-site. With Insight and Insight XT, it's for Solid Edge data. If you want to manage your Solid Edge data and you're primarily at one location, these are the tools for you. So I've seen people have 1 or 2 engineers that are off-site and they use accelerators to make sure that they can log into the server that's at the main location, and that way they can quickly see the data not have a lag because they're so far away. When you get to where you have close to equal number of people at 2 sites, you really want to be talking Teamcenter. So why do we need to manage our data? Well, everything that I'm sure you already know. Storing files on a server with multiple users accessing the files causes issues. So with Solid Edge for SharePoint, we have a single source of data. We have a check-in, check-out procedure where you only have read access to files that somebody else has checked out. So it reduces your errors and your rework. With security, you want the right users to have the right access to the right data at the right time. You might only want your manufacturing people to have access to release documents, for example. With your instantaneous exchange of information, there's no more file folder floating around the office. And I've actually seen places that have, that's the person's job, is to take that file folder of a change and make sure it gets signed off by people and then file it. So this is going to be all electronic, so it's instantaneous. With your history, there's a complete log file, and it identifies who, what, when, and where. With my favorite part, the search tools, they're lightning fast, and I'll show you that when we get further into it. There are many other benefits that you get. Those are just the ones that I see at every location that I go that are common to every company. Let's talk about the server setup. On your server, you're going to need 4 pieces of software that we will set up for you. It is Windows Server 2008, and we recommend, well, Windows Server, we recommend 2008 R2. SQL Server, we recommend SQL Server 2008 R2. Those are certified and recommended. You can also use the 2008 version that's a 64-bit with the service packs that are shown. And then SharePoint, which is free. You can use SharePoint Foundation. And 2010 is only available as 64-bit, so all your servers have to be 64-bit. So let's say you used to have a server that was a SQL server and it's 32-bit, and your SharePoint was 64. You used to be able to do that. Now everything from Microsoft has to be 64-bit. That's their mandate. And then Solid Edge for SharePoint, formerly called Insight XT, for your server. So those things I set up on your server, get it up and running. And when I do that, I get this structure right out of the box. There's a top-level engineering site, and that site is just a landing page. It's got a URL, and you type it into your Internet Explorer, and you will see the in-house site, the purchase site, the sandbox site, and the document site. These sub-sites are just places to house a library and a library of the same name. And then and the library is just a place to hold your file structure. So you can have any folder structure you want, and they don't have to be the same among these 4 sites. And we'll see this when we get into the software. So now that we have your server set up, let's talk about the client. On the client side, we have the first thing we do, obviously, is you have to load Insight with the right service pack. And then there is Microsoft Silverlight, which needs to be added, and that's just for display configurations in Internet Explorer. And it's usually on your machine already. It's a Microsoft free product that just displays things better. And then there's a client piece, a Solid Edge for SharePoint client that needs to be loaded and configured. And you can see and manage that you have, once this is done, you'll have certain options that you can select and go through. This can all be controlled by your options file if you're running an options file with your licensing. And the important thing here in Helpers, it shows you what your document name formula will be. So you'll notice in the Pathfinder here, I have more information than I'd normally get with just regular Solid Edge. I get or even Insight. Now I get the number, the part number, I get the revision, and I get the item name. And this makes it extremely nice to see all of this information in one location. And you can change this based on whatever your business rules are. So that's the client setup. And then we need to figure out, how do we get our data into the managed location? Well, we have a tool called Add to Insight XT, and it's in this data preparation area. And the reason for that is because you need to have clean data going in. So you can use those tools to make sure that you fix your links and you don't have any broken links, no duplicate documents and whatnot. And then you can come and add that data in. And you want to add the top level folder. So if I was going to add wiring harness, I want to make sure everything in wiring harness has all the links contained within wiring harness, nothing outside to any of this other stuff. And it's going to duplicate that exact folder structure. In addition to that, it'll bring up anything that's linked, Excel files, PDFs, whatever else is linked. So everything has to be in that folder. Then I can select the folder that I want it to go to in the managed location. So this is the unmanaged data I want to add. This is the managed location where I want it to go. And just for testing purposes, I'll put it in the testing location. Then you want to do your dry run. Always do your dry run first because it'll find the problem. So if, let's say 95% of the files here are good, they don't have any issues. Well, if I just go and add those documents, all those files are going to go up to the server, and the ones that can't aren't. And that's going to be a problem because then I've got broken links now on my server, and you don't want that. So always do your dry run first. That's what the tool is there for. Okay, so now I have all my data managed, and I've got my server set up, my client set up, and I've got all my data managed. How does this affect the everyday user? Well, the beauty in this is that it really doesn't. There are only a few things that you're going to notice as the user. So the first thing that I should point out is when I open an assembly, you're going to see here that it says it's checked out to me. What that means is when I do a file open on an assembly, it downloads that assembly from the server to my local cache. All a local cache is just a place to store your temporary files, just like temporary internet files. So I get the benefit of operating off my local computer and not over the not over the network, depending on the speed and the traffic on the network. So it downloads and checks out this top level assembly to me. Everything else here I get a read-only copy of until I in-place activate. Then it will download and check that file out to me. So that's how other users can be working in the same assembly. They can go and check out something, and you can go and check out something, and you can still be working the same assembly. Now what happens if I go to something that's released and try to check it out? Well, if I in-place activate on something that's released, I'm going to get a notice. And this is one of the things that the users are going to notice here that's a little bit of a change. they're going to get this read-only assistant, which I'm sure you've probably seen before, that it's released and I have to do a revise or a save as. Now, that brings me to one of the other things that the users, that's one of the things that they're going to see is status makes it so that you either have access to this stuff or you don't. And then if I do just a new file, let's say I do a new part file here, and I'm just going to do my standard block. I'm sure you guys all have a test block that you guys use for testing purposes. I think everybody does. I think every system I look at has test block as a part name. If I go and close this now and I say I want to save it, it brings up the Common Properties dialog box, CPD, Common Properties dialog. All this is doing is keeping my data straight here for me. So the metadata from my files, or the parameters, or whatever you want to call it, those things need to be entered. The starred, red starred things have to be entered. So as a business, you can decide what things, if you think material is important and has to be added for every single part, then you can configure that so that it is a mandatory property. So obviously I have to put in the URL. There's some things that Insight has to have, and that's where is this file going is one of them. Now notice it picks a content type for me based on the fact that it's a solid edge file. I'll talk about what the content type is when we get in there. And then I can just assign it the next part number. Based on that content type, it's going to pull the next available part number, and I'll show you that when we get in as well. And then it pulls the next revision. So I don't have to keep track of any of this stuff anymore myself. I can just have Solid Edge for SharePoint do that. So just as file open is pull from the server and put on my local cache, file close means when I say save it on a file close, it's going to take from my local cache whatever is different and put it back up onto the server. So it's constantly checking the time date in my cache compared to what's on the server and making the adjustment that needs to be made there. All that's done behind the scenes for you, and you get the benefit of not relying on your network speed. So really, as the user, that is pretty much it. I mean, as the everyday user. Now what I want to do is I want to walk you through what happens when we use some of the tools that are available in Solid Edge for SharePoint, some of the other tools that are available. Okay. So if I go to the landing page that I talked about, here's your server name, here's your sites, the sites, and then XTS. Now these two parts of the URL are standard out of the box. Your server is going to be whatever your server name is. You can change these if you'd like to. Here's the landing page. It has access to the 4 sites that we talked about in-house for those things you design, purchase for those things you buy out, sandbox for your engineer to play around, and documents for those things that are other than Solid Edge. I have the ability to customize this page as a user, and I also have the ability as the administrator to force somebody to have something on their page, such as company announcements or team discussion. So as the user, I've chose to add my calendar, and then as the administrator, I chose to make announcements, team discussion, and tasks mandatory for the users. On each of the 4 subsites, if I go to in-house now, we have the content browser and the relation browser. And the content browser allows you to see your file structure. So I'm going to see the site here first. This is the site, and you'll see the URL associated with it. And then I'm going to see the library. And a site, again, is just a place to hold a library, a landing page to contain your data. Library is just the place that you put your data. And then under that, you're just going to see the file structure as you would anywhere else. And you can navigate through it just like you would out on your network. Now, that brings me to what's underneath the file structure. We have containers called parts. And this container here is different from a Solid Edge part. It's actually a content type in Solid Edge, which is really just a container. And inside that container is another container that has the Solid Edge part revision. And then you have the Solid Edge actual part file from Solid Edge. So we've got the container that's the part, the container that's the part revision, and then the solid edge files. The nice thing about this is that we can add other files than just solid edge. So regular Insight, you can just have solid edge files, and you can have another location if you want to put Word documents or whatever. Here we can store that stuff together because we use these containers, which are called content types. Now if I mouse over this container that's called part, solid edge SharePoint part, I can look at the preview property card. And the preview property card shows me the latest revision. So it'll pull, if there are solid edge files, it'll pull the picture of whatever the latest revision is. And if I look at the properties, these are specific to that part. Notice there's no status because and no revision, because this is the container that houses the revision. So if there was a B, C, they'd all be under this part container. If I do the same thing on the part revision, you're going to see the /A, and you're going to also see the properties that are specific to that part revision. And there's the status. This little pencil means it's working, so it's available to be changed by those that have the right permissions. Now I can send this to the relation browser, and my relation browser is a way to navigate to see what's inside a container. Since this is an assembly, it uses other solid edge for SharePoint part revisions, and we can show it as a tree view or a balloon view or the organic that you saw. So I can see these other part revision containers, and I can see it gives me the symbol that there's solid edge part files or assembly files inside these containers, and it also gives me the symbol of the status. And then I can click here and see the preview property card and check out what this is, or if I have the right permissions, I can edit properties or look at the properties. So this gives me a very nice way to locate things. I can also traverse up the tree and do a where used, which I'll show you shortly. Another fantastic way, and actually my favorite way to find things, is to search. And the search is so fast. I'm just going to search for things that have the letters ST in them. And when I do that, you're going to see, well, maybe you will see if I scroll back. Actually, I'm going to go back and do a search on name. I'm going to search on name that contains ST. If I do that, you'll see down here I have 23 pages of data. And the pages are not short pages. So all of that data is accessed that fast because everything's stored in a SQL Server table. All your parameters or your attributes or your metadata, whatever you're going to call them, are all stored, even for your Word documents and everything, are stored in one SQL Server table. So the solid edge for SharePoint search goes to that one table and boom, returns your results that fast. That makes me very happy because I've spent many times searching through Windows searches for half an hour trying to find what I need. In addition to that, I get to search on more things than I could in a regular Windows search, and if you add custom properties through Solid Edge, you can also search on those. But wait, there's more. I feel like a marketing person out there selling something. No, anyway, there's content types that have that you can limit your searches to as well. So I can choose, remember, content types are just containers. So I have an ECO container, and we'll talk about all this in a little bit. The part container, the part revision container. So I can limit my search to those things if I choose to do so. Now that I've talked to you about the search in the tools here, we have other tools that are available to us. One of those is projects. In the projects location, we can see that we have a way to organize our data by project. Now I choose here to store all my Solid Edge files in-house and then link them here to my project binder. If I have something that's actually residing inside, located inside the project container, you'll get the little arrow drop down and you'll see it here. Whatever's linked to it, I'm going to see in the relation browser. So I have these things linked to this project. And this is just another way to organize your data. Now, another container that I have is called a cart. And a cart is a temporary location. I can't embed something in it, or I can't put files here to store them. I can only link things to them. And the reason for that is I'm going to use a cart for a workflow, say, or something else like that, where I just need to gather things up. Maybe I want to go around and gather them up to a cart and then link the cart to the project. It'll link all those files in, or send the cart through the workflow, and it'll release all those files. And then the cart is immediately deleted, which is why you don't see anything here. So it's a temporary thing, temporary tool. I showed you search. We'll talk about change management in a minute. I want to sign in here real fast as the administrator so I can show you configurations and permissions. And to do that, I need to be the administrator. And I also need to be able to type. All right, so now you'll see I'm signed in up here as the system account. And if I go to permissions, I can see the standard out-of-the-box permissions and the ones I've added. So I get these groups. I get an approver group, which is for workflow. I get doc controllers. Now that's like the super user that can do anything. And I usually just, when I set this up, create an account and don't have anyone use that account on a regular basis, only use that account to fix stuff. So if somebody accidentally releases something, you can go back in and change the status, or save a released file where you don't want to be able to do that normally. This is just really for fixing errors. Manufacturing, where you have access to just release data, and then reviewers, which is also for reviewers, and approvers are both for workflow. It's a group of people that can have action on a workflow, and I'll show you that. You can add somebody in directly, such as my administrator account, and then I've added also myself as a direct person that I've added in here, or I can put them in a group, and these groups are out of the box SharePoint and have member has contribute permission, owner has full permission, visitor has read permission. And if I don't like those permission levels, I can always come in here and add my own custom permission level if I don't like the things that those, such as contribute, can view, add. Maybe I don't want them to be able to delete anything. So I change that, add my special permission level, and do it that way. So the sky's the limit there with permissions, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Now, configuration, you're going to see the status manager, which tells us our statuses. So you see the number associated, and these numbers come from way back. I remember when I worked at Cummins, we used these back when there was microfiche. Oh my gosh, I'm dating myself. But anyway, when you actually had to write things on prints, that's where these statuses come from. That's just an industry standard. And then, and if you don't like it, these things can be changed. And then the icon that's associated with that. And then its predecessor. So for example, working, you have to come from Sandbox and Reviewer in approval. Unless you're that all-encompassing doc controller, you can't take a release and go back to working. And then it gives you the permission level for all these different SharePoint groups. And we'll talk more about that as well. With part numbering, you get the content type and the prefix and incrementer for the part number that's associated with that content type. Now, these are out of the box, and if you don't like them, we can change them. And you can also add custom content parts. So let's say you want part numbering that's different for two different part types. Say you have, I don't know, materials or grades of sheet metal, and you want the part numbering to be different for those two different groups. We can do that very easily here as the administrator. And with, we did the status manager, revision control, this shows you where the action's happening again. So with the part revision is what's going to have status and go through workflow and whatnot. And again, if we add custom content types, we would add them here and put whatever we want to go through the workflow over here. Update drawings. When you send something through a workflow, you have changed the status. Let's say I release top-level assembly, and it has multiple drafts that are associated with it. Well, those draft files on the actual face of the draft are not going to have that status of 80 and released unless I open that and save it. So what this allows you to do is take all of those drafts, send them to another machine, and do that stuff at night so as not to consume a license. Or you can just have a machine set up during the day and it'll run all the time doing that. It's your choice, but it gets special permission so that it can open that release file and save it just so that that 80 appears on the front of the draft. And then templates, we have our reports and our solid edge templates that are located here, and the administrator has the ability to change those. All right, so now what I want to do is go back in and sign in as my user account again, because I want to put this into action and show you how you can use an ECO process. So I'm going to go to, actually I'm going to go here and show you what I'm going to do first. So I should point out that my virtual server here does not have an Exchange server set up. So normally all the tasks that you're going to see me do today, you would get email notification. But again, since I don't have I didn't set up an Exchange server here, I'm not going to see the email notification. But in a production setting, you will get email notification that you have a task to do, so that you know you have to do it. And I'm going to wear all the hats. I don't want to be signing in and signing out all the time. So I'm just going to I've just assigned all this stuff to myself as this one user, but in real life and production, obviously this would be going to different, the tasks would be going to different individuals. So in the first part of this, I'm going to play the role of an individual, and that individual is a test engineer, and the test engineer has determined that the forks here that I'm going to show you, these forks that are holding the front wheel, have a stability issue. They're not stiff enough because the yoke that's between them isn't stiff enough. This part needs to have some ribs added to it. So you can see that there. Underneath, we need to add some ribs to stiffen this up. So I need to create an ECR to do this. And I do not have to have a solid edge license in order to create the ECR. I can simply sign in as long as I have a license for solid edge for SharePoint, and I can come to the ECR location and notice that we deliver everything in one ribbon bar here. So what you need is at your fingertips all the time. You don't have to go hunting for something. Now here's my content type ECR, and because of that, it's going to assign the correct part number. And again, if you don't like that system, you can change it. So I'm going to say stiffen the yoke here, and these are customizable as well. And once I create my ECR, I need to go and locate the part that I want. So I'm going to go to, I know that it's got to have fork in it somewhere. So I'm going to go to my search tools, and I'm just going to search on title and fork. And it's going to return a bunch of things here, but I know I want the part revision, so I'm just going to exclude everything because all the action has to happen on the part revision. And I see that I have that fork. I can check out my preview properties, the yoke. That's the thing that I want there. I can check out the status here to see, well, it's released. I'm going to have to do a revision. The other thing I can do here is you'll see that the ECR is the active object still because it's the last thing I created, so I can just simply hit the link button, and whatever I've highlighted here links, and I get the feedback that I've linked that successfully to my ECR, and I'll show you that when we go back. But right now what I want to do is I want to open this in my viewer, and the reason for that is because I want, instead of having that going to get the print and physically writing on it and writing up what I want to do, anything that I do, so, you know, if I would get a print and circle, change the chamfer here, you know, make this bend different there, whatever it is, I can do that electronically now, and that's going to travel with me with this ECR so that everybody has the availability to see it. It's not just going to be on somebody's desktop. I'm going to turn on my markup tools and get a new markup group, and then I'm just going to highlight the area that I want to add the ribs here, and I'm going to say add ribs to stiffen area to fix fork issue, or whatever else I want to put. You know, this is just an example, but so there's never going to be any question now what needs to be done because this is going to travel with my ECR. And notice it gives it a PCF extension, and all that is just a fancy way of saying markup. And then it tells me, it asks me where I want to save this, and I'm just going to go right to that ECR and save it right in there. And then I guess I should point out when we get back here that if I go back here to change management, and I have to click on the right thing, of course. So if I go back to change management and I look here, now I've got this PCF, it's embedded here, it resides here. Again, anything that I link you're going to see in the relation browser, anything that is physically located here in this container is going to be shown underneath it. So now that I have my PCF and my associated file, I need to create the paperwork that goes along with it. So if I have testing data to prove this or whatever, I can just go here and upload that. But I have a form that I've created. I'm sure you guys all have an ECR or ECO form that you use, and we can attach the exact form that you already use so your users are comfortable with it, and they can fill that out. But the nice thing here too, and I can put, stiffen fork, yoke, or whatever, CPCF, whatever I want to put in here. Of course, I have to type it right. But and I could put the product that's impacted, whatever. But the nice thing is I can put up here, I can notify people that I want them to input data up here that's going to be a file property now that's searchable. Now, if I save this, it's going to save that right into my location, my PCF location. I'm sorry, my ECR location. Too many acronyms. And I will see now that I have the engineering change request form, whatever documentation I loaded here, or if I put it somewhere and linked it, it'll be here. So as the test engineer now, I have everything that I need, and I just need to notify my manager that I want them to review it to see if it's going to be converted to an ECO. You'll notice that there's no status on an ECR. So ECRs need to be looked at, or you can have a workflow to send them to a manager, a special workflow. They have to be encompassed in an ECO. The ECO is what has the status. That's where the status is. So the request is just somebody asking you, can we do this? The order is actually saying this has to be done now. So I'm going to take off my test engineering hat and put on my manager hat, because I see that I have this ECR that has to be reviewed, and I can come in here and take a look at this ECR and see, yeah, we do need to make these changes because of the test data showing that there's a problem with the fork. I can also see that there is, if I do a where used here, I see it's used in an assembly that we're working on currently in engineering, and we need to add 2 parts to that same assembly. So I'm going to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, even though these 2 parts are not associated with this other part. They're all in the same assembly, so I can assign it to the same engineer. Typically, you'd probably do another ECO so that you keep the paperwork straight, but go with me on this, because what I want to do is show you what happens if I add structure here in Solid Edge for SharePoint, how this BOM syncs automatically when you open it in Solid Edge. So as the manager now, I'm going to create an ECO here, new ECO, and I'm going to assign it the next available number, and I'm going to say stiffen yoke and add 2 components. And the same thing, these impact and urgency, those things are customizable as well if I need something different there. And now my ECO is my current active object. And because it is my current active object, I can just go down to my ECR and link it to the active object. So now all of that work that I did is not lost. It's all available right here in my ECO. But I also need to find the parts that I want associated with that ECO. So I'm going to go, since I know right where that assembly is, I'm just going to browse to it, because this is another way you can find your data, is if you happen to know right where it is, you can just go get it straight from the assembly. So here is the assembly that I want, the frame assembly. I can take a look at my preview properties card to make sure that it's what I want, and it is. And then I can just link that. Actually, I have to link, because all the action takes place not on the part container, but on the part revision. So I have to, it won't let me make that mistake. Insight covers you there. Link to the active ECO. And then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to make this my active part, because I want to go find the parts that I want to add to it, the components I want to add. So I'm going to make this my active, and you'll see that change up here in my active object. And then I'm going to go search for those components that I want. And I'm just going to do a title search for suspension because I know those are suspension components. And again, I'm going to limit myself to the content type part revision, or the container. And now I get the parts that I need, connect, block, and link. And I can just go ahead and link those to the active object. And when I do that, it's actually adding those to the BOM structure. So if I go back to change management, and I take a look at, let's send this guy over to the relation browser, I can see that, lo and behold, I have my ECO that's linked to my ECR that has all the documentation under it, and I also have the assembly here. And if I expand this assembly, I'm going to see, and I could zoom in on each one of these and whatnot, but I'm just going to look at it. It'll be easier to find in the BOM. So I can also look at this as a regular BOM structure. So I can see if I scroll down through here, 601, somewhere else in here is probably 600. There it is right there. So I've added those parts, that 601 and that 600, right to the BOM structure here in Solid Edge for SharePoint. Now my work is done as the manager. I've got all my documentation. Let's say maybe I want to add a Word document here. Actually, I better make this my, another way I can change my active object here is I can just go and select something that I've had before. So I'm going to change my active object to be my ECO here, and then I'm just going to create the paperwork that I need associated with that. And I'm not going to fill all this out. You get the picture here. If I, fill out the properties, whatever. So then if I save this, that's going to go into my change order location. And so let's say maybe you don't have both of these processes. Maybe you just have the change order process. So you don't have to use the ECRs if you don't want. It can be configured any way you want. So now if I can see that underneath my ECO, I now have my paperwork associated. And as a manager, I'm just going to start the workflow now. So I have my ECO release that I'm going to start, and this goes from working to review to approval to released. And I'm going to show you that in just a second here as a block diagram so that we can see what's happening. So now I just start it, and then I'm going to show you the workflow here. So I've started, as the test engineer, created my ECR, I've notified the manager, and I could put this as a part of the workflow if I wanted to as well. I just didn't happen to do it this way. I chose to do it on the ECO. But I notify the manager to approve or defer. Once the manager starts the ECO and starts the workflow, the design group is notified automatically. And if the design group completes the work and approves that, it'll move on from there. And let's watch what happens then. So now let's say that I am I'm the test engineer that comes in and reviews this, or I get notification that I need to do something here. And my notification in this case is going to be my task, but obviously it would be email. And then I can look at my task saying I've got a new ECO to complete, and I can take a look at what all that documentation is all here right at my fingertips. I don't have to go searching for it. Anything that I need is here for me and for everyone else to see. It's not in some folder that's floating around. And then let's say I just want to go and open this so I can complete the work now. So I'm just going to open it from here. Obviously I could go to Solid Edge and open it that way too as well, but I want to show you what happens when we open Solid Edge. It's going to notify me here that I've got a synchronization issue. I've got BOM structure here in Solid Edge for SharePoint that's not in Solid Edge. So what do I want to do with that? Well, I want to add that BOM structure into Solid Edge. So this is a way somebody who doesn't have Solid Edge can affect the BOM structure. They can add components, and those components are just going to be placed right in the middle of the part, or I'm sorry, the assembly. So again, I've checked out this top level assembly. To me, everything else I get a read-only copy. I see here that I've got an assembly checked out to somebody else, and that assembly has parts that are checked out to that person as well, and we're going to see what happens in the workflow when we try to change that status when somebody else has got it checked out. I've got some release things, I've got some things that are in review. I'm sorry, that are in working. You'll see the status of working 30 there. Now at the bottom, I'll see the new parts that I've added here. I've got my suspension connect block and my suspension link. Now it puts them there in the middle, and it just creates a ground. So I'm going to remove the ground, and then I'm just going to move this thing out where I can see it. So let's say I just want to go 300 there. And then the other thing I want to do is I want to just move this guy so that it's in sort of the right orientation so that I can assemble it. And after I've done that, I want to select some parts that I need to have activated. So I'm going to select some parts that are not currently active that I want to activate. Now I'm ready to assemble. This is very easy to do. This is another one of my favorite things in Solid Edge, is how easy it is to do the assembly constraints. And I need an axial line here. Let me just zoom up on that so I can see it. And that aligns things the way I want them, and that looks good. So now I have to get my other part, which is this one that's also in the middle here. So I'm just going to remove that constraint and bring this guy out here as well. Let's just say 300. And now now what I want to do is I'm just going to I want to make sure that I activated this guy here, because I forget now if I included him in my select set or not. So I'm just going to activate that guy there, and then I'm ready to assemble. Zoom up on this. And that guy needs to be flipped, so I can just hit my flip button here. And then continue on with getting these things into the right place. 2 more to go. This guy needs to go here. And then my last one, I need to do a mate with a 3mm offset to put this into the right location. Now, like Quick Pick gives you the ability to get what you need very quickly. And that all looks good. So you can see how I can affect the BOM structure without actually having a copy of Solid Edge, and then assigning the work to be done to add what I want to be added. So there's no confusion on what parts I need, and putting them in the assembly. The other way I can do that, just a quick side note here, not to get too far off track, but I can use Structure Editor to and it's kind of like, if you're used to Revision Manager, it's sort of like Revision Manager in that you get to see some actions on the left and some results on the right. The difference here is that I can actually control my structure. I can add parts into my structure here, just like I did in Solid Edge for SharePoint. This is just another way to take a look at my structure. I can add a line here and insert something that I want, or rearrange my structure any way that I want to here. And then when I open Solid Edge, it's going to sync up again for me. So very nice tool, easy to use. The last thing I need to do is the engineer here, is I need to go and take this part and add the ribs to it. So when I in place to activate again, that's pulling it down from the server, checking it out to me. You'll see over here, it's revision A, and I get this notification that this thing's already released. So I'm going to have to do a revision, and all of this is kept track for you by Solid Edge for SharePoint. No need for an Access database to keep track of your part numbers or your revision letters anymore. I can just assign the next one. Notice it's done the where use for me. I don't have to take care of that either. And now here's the instantaneous access part again. Is if you see in the bottom left-hand corner, it's actually going to load, check my security, and load that right up to SharePoint and make it available. Check it out to me, but make it available to see for everybody else. So again, everybody's going to see it immediately as it happens here. So you'll see now I've got the B revision here, and now I can do my work. And I'm just going to flip this over and add some ribs here. I have my feature library already set up with some ribs I've used before, and they might not exactly fit, but the beauty of a web network is that it'll adjust for me, as you'll see here. I'll just center that guy, and then you can see that they kind of stick out, but if I attach them, that's all fixed for me there. So now you see the web is part of this, and it is there complete. I can go back to my assembly. The last thing I want to do is to make sure that I grab the draft file, because I don't want the person coming into the draft to have to see that lovely notification that something's out of date. And you'll see that there's that common thing that I'm sure you've seen before, and no ribs, and then I update views, voila, the ribs are there. And if I save this, I get my common properties dialog box. Everybody uses CPD, and I try not to use all the acronyms all the time because I get acronymed out. And I'm sure people are tired of hearing all the acronyms that are everywhere. So this takes care of now noticing that this has to be sent back in. Notice the action was check in. It's going to take it from my local cache, put it back to the server. And similarly here, my assembly here is also going to be put back on. I just want to get it in a better view here. There we go. And it'll check and see all of these parts, which ones have been changed. And remember that we've got an assembly and parts checked out to somebody else, and we've got some release stuff here, and I'll show you what happens just a minute. And it grabs the assembly, and it's going to check that back in to the server, and that B is not released. It's available now. And my Solid Edge work is done. If I go back here to my tasks, I can say, now I want to complete this task because my work is done. So if you remember, let's go back to our workflow here. So we created the ECR, the engineering manager approved it, created the ECO, workflow starts, design engineer was notified, I completed the work as the design engineer, and then approved that work, and now it's going to move forward to in review status. Now, a couple things to note here. One is that the notifiers are going to be notified, and if I set the workflow, I have the ability to set the workflow up with rollback or no rollback. And what that means is I can say that if one reviewer says no, everything rolls back and is as if we didn't do the workflow. And if I say all the reviewers I can also say all the reviewers have to say no for it to roll back. Similarly, I can say one reviewer has to say yes for it to move forward, or all the reviewers have to say yes. I have that ability. And you probably want in different scenarios to have different workflows, and you can, by all means, have as many workflows as you want. So let's go see now what happens with in review. We should be in review status now. That should happen automatically. And before I do that real fast, let me just hold on. Let me just go to the configuration manager. In review again is the little eyeglass symbol, and notice how it changes everybody's permissions to read except for the reviewers. So it locks down those files while they're in review, so nobody else can do anything with them. That's critical. Now I'll go back to change management and update here. And then you're going to see that I have the little reviewer glasses now on everything, right down through the ECR. And if I send this to my relation browser, I will see all my other parts. Now this brings me to that it's not really going to be all my other parts. It's going to be the parts that it is able to. Because with rollback, I've chosen to, if it encounters something like something that's already released, or those parts that were checked out to somebody else, it's going to move forward on the parts that it is able to change to in review. I have that set up. So as the company, and again, you're probably going to want to have both of these. So in some cases, you're going to want to roll back. If it encounters something it can't change, you're going to roll back and notify somebody that, hey, it can't do it. But in some cases, like this, you're going to want to move forward and just do the parts that are available to do. So that's what you get here with the sunglasses. Those parts that are able to be changed are changed their status. So now the reviewer is notified, and if I go to my tasks, I'm going to see I have a new task. Now obviously this would go to a reviewer group, not me again, but since I don't want to log in and log out. So I go and I review it and I complete my task and I say I want to approve that. Again, here I have it set up that just one person has to approve it for it to move forward. I could also have it that everybody has to approve it to move forward. So all my parts now should go to in approval status, and the approvers should be notified. And if you don't want two steps, some people say, well, we don't do review and approve, we just do checkers and that's it. So I could just have a checker step and that's all. And then it goes right to released after the check step. It's all based on what your business needs are. So now if I go to, let me just show you in configuration, we're going to get the people, the little guy, little person, girl, I don't know what that is, little person, symbol, and you're going to see that everybody has the read permission except for the approvers here. And we will see when we go back to change management, we're going to see our tiny little person symbol once I update here. So now you'll see, and if I'd send that to the relation browser, everything that was able to be changed, because that's how I chose to set it up, is going to be changed to in approval status, or the tiny little person symbol. And everything else that can't be will stay the way it is. So now the approvers have been notified. And if I go back to my tasks, I will see, of course, I'm in the approval group as well. And I'm just going to approve this. You know, obviously the group would have to go and review the stuff and make sure it's okay to approve it. And then that's my final step. So once the approvers have approved it, again, I can have all of them have to approve it or just one of them, then it's going to go to release status and my workflow will be done. I want to point out too here that there's a log file, and this log file tracks everything that happens. So I have what action was done, who did it, what the time was, and also I have, you'll notice here, this says invalid right here because this part was the one that was checked out to somebody else. So it tells you when it can't do something, and again, I have it moving forward even though it's not able to change this part, which is what I wanted. So now if I look at configuration, you're going to see with released, everybody but doc controllers has read-only access to a release document. And I go back to my change management, and I'm going to see the lock symbol, which is my released, once I update here. And then also in the relation browser, you will see the lock symbol on all of those parts that it was able to release. Now I have the lock symbol, and those that were checked out to somebody else were not. So that's really what I wanted to show you here with Insight Solid Edge for SharePoint, or Insight XT. Just as a wrap up here, the difference between Insight and Insight XT really is part numbering, ECO, ECR manager, workflow sign off here. Those things are the in organization. Organization is by assembly with Insight. Solid Edge for SharePoint or Insight XT is by the project. Or item, however you want it. So there is also a cost associated with Solid Edge for SharePoint, each seat, and for Insight there is not. I hope I showed you today how you can improve your throughput in your company based on using workflows with Solid Edge for SharePoint. We do offer a standard implementation service, and our package is available that includes out-of-the-box standard implementation for a server and up to 15 clients, basic user and administrator training, and then also we can split up the cleanup of the data, or we can train you on how to clean up your data and migrate it to the server, however you want to handle that. Thank you very much for being online with me today, and have a nice afternoon.